afternoon, depending on the time of day it is right now. But on behalf of the North Dakota Society of Professional Land Surveyors, which I'll refer to as NDSPLS a number of times, I'd like to thank you for your invitation. And you have now known our names, Ed, Greg, and Ken. I would ask first Ed, he is our president of NDSPLS at the present time, if there's any more of a background you would like to give these folks besides what you have already spoke of. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure that you folks knew who you were listening to. And of course, my name's Ken Link. I became registered in North Dakota as a land surveyor in '79. I also was a charter member of NDSPLS. I had served as the third president of the organization. After serving as an officer, I felt that I was more satisfied with my efforts as being on committees than as an officer, because there I got to voice my opinion much stronger. I'm also on the advisory committee for the Land Surveying and Civil Engineering Technology curriculum at the College of Science. I worked for North American Coal Corporation for 41 years and now retired. And that's pretty much the background. I do live in Hazen. So on this PowerPoint, we at NDSPLS put this PowerPoint together as a self-evaluation or a self-learning tool for individuals. So if one of you people wanted to sit down and know what we were talking about, there's quite a bit of information in this. More than what the bullet points or the talking points would be on a presentation. So there's going to be parts of this that you may sit and read, but I may not mention it. Now during the presentation, if you have questions and they're short enough, I'll try to cover them right away. If not, I'll put them under a cover later, and I'm going to have Greg and Ed write down those questions. And you folks, if you have questions, jot them down, and when we're in the discussion, we can try to address those. But we will address during the presentation. The discussion on our bullet points today, our mission statement, challenges facing the easements, North Dakota landowner concerns, state requirements for utility easement on state-owned lands. We have our federal requirements for utilities on federal land, and NDSPLS, our solutions for utility easement issues in North Dakota, our recommendations for moving forward, and then we'll look at our open discussion. Our mission statement at NDSPLS is, as you read here, but is to elevate the standard of all surveyors in North Dakota. And I can tell you this, as being a charter member of NDSPLS, at the time the organization, which is a voluntary organization, maybe similar to the Northwest Landowners, we have found out that there was a broad range of standards. Some surveyors think it should be done this way, others this way. And it was to develop standards, establish minimum requirements for surveys. So not all surveyors survey documents are going to look the same, but those members of the society strive to meet the minimum requirements. Assist in promoting legislation. We have done that over the years. 2 years ago we weren't too successful. We tried to establish a minimum education requirement, and that went down the tubes, but we're going to be back at it again. We want to work in cooperation with local governments, our counties, state and federal organizations. We have a code of ethics, and we want to uphold a rigid code of ethics amongst all our members. Strive to improve the relationship between our clients, because sometimes surveyors in the past, and maybe today, have done some type of activity that their client wasn't satisfied with. And as the general perception of surveyors, we want to eliminate the bad name if it's out there for surveyors. And we want to have a good relationship between surveyors and engineers. Now, the reason that's down there at the bottom, according to North Dakota Century Code, there is a defined scope of responsibility and authority in performing survey work and performing engineering work. Licensed surveyors follow what's under the responsibility of surveyors. Engineers follow a different regiment of requirements. They're not the same. A surveyor is not an engineer, and an engineer is not a surveyor. Well, as we look at these goals right here, share a network of information, discussions, to become educated, those goals right there, are those the goals of the Northwest landowners as you folks see it? Are they not very similar to the NDSPLS goals? Challenges we face, landowners, agents, and surveyors. Okay. Easement. Maybe you all know what an easement is, but it's a right of one owner of a parcel of land by reason of such ownership to use the land of another for a specific purpose. Now, this definition is more like that of access, ingress, egress, where I own a piece of land and I want to get access into it and I have to cross someone else's land. That's maybe more of that definition of one owning land and using another's. But basically, an easement is one party using another party's land for a specific purpose. And that particular easement, I don't know if any surveyor could locate that easement. An unlocatable easement on the land creates problems of title for the landowner, encumbers large areas of land unnecessarily, and can be a matter of public safety. Now, you folks can think of all the concerns that follow under this category. We'll discuss that as we get into the slides here. Okay, I'll show you some examples of an easement document from the survey point of view, or surveyor's point of view, of what should be on the drawing to be locatable. There are others that I'll point out that are not. Now, of course, we're not here to practice law. We're not giving you legal advice at all. We're giving you the opinions of the members of NDSPLS and how we should survey to take care of one of our mission statements, the public. Ed, you want to go there? Maybe you all have seen this statement: in consideration of the sum of $1 and other goods and valuable considerations. I have always wondered what goods and valuable considerations are. You know, in today's world, it's more like follow the dollar, you'll know. In receipt of which is hereby acknowledged. Grantor does grant and convey unto the utility its successors and assigns a permanent right-of-way easement with the right, privilege, and authority of the utility to lay, construct, maintain, inspect, test, protect, or operate, increase and decrease. Got to remember that. If you see that, the capacity of repair, replace, and remove its utility lines and other appurtenances and fixtures. Now, appurtenances and fixtures, be careful when you, I always wonder what that is. What's the appurtenances that are going to go in on a utility line? I mean, like, if it's a underground electric or an overhead electric, or is there some big structure that's going to go in there? That always throws up a red flag for me as a surveyor. Of course, the easement would be through, over, under, across the following described real property. And this was an actual easement out of Burke County here in North Dakota, described as follows. And you can read it here. The township, the range, 5th principal meridian, that's what all our sections are surveyed off. And it says section 10, northeast quarter. I'm going to tell you right now that a surveyor never wrote this. Surveyors are trained. If you want to know if a description is written by a surveyor, it'll start out at the top. Section 10 northeast, or no, it'll start out northeast quarter of section 10, township range. This here, in my opinion, as I read it, that's a blanket easement. And you heard of the term a blanket easement? As surveyors, we don't like them. In my career working for North American Coal, I was responsible for the development of easement descriptions on land that North American Coal owned. And a lot of people wanted to come in, put utilities in that, and they wanted a blanket easement. It was, no, it's not going to happen. Don't even think about it. Don't come and talk to me. So we'll move on with this. Where is it? That's the question. Where is the easement? Is the easement on this yellow line? Because what we have here is right in here. This is not quite to scale. This is exaggerated north and south, but here's the center section. Imagine it. That's the northeast quarter. Is that the utility? Would you go to the next one, please? Or does it come across here and go up like this? And it's along the east section line. And there should be one more. Or does it cut a diagonal across the northeast quarter? Now, if you read that description, any one of these can be right. But in fact, the way they laid it, they came up here like this, just like this one shows. You can see the scar from the utility. But they do have the right, when it's a blanket easement, to go where they please within that quarter section. Now, they may not concern the landowner. If I was the landowner, that would certainly concern me. And we'll get into some issues what develop from that. Next one, please, Ed. Okay, here we go. A blanket easement is one that, when created, is not limited to any specific area of the land within the easement description. And you saw the illustration. There was the easement description, the northeast quarter. It could go within anywhere within that. In effect, the blanket easement may limit other future surface rights of the landowner. And an example of such a thing is like this. If that's the whole northeast quarter and you have a son or a relative that you want to sell 10 or 15 acres out of there, so they may want to, what I would call a conditional use permit for a non-farm resident. And you would deed them 15 acres and get it surveyed out. And now they own that piece of land, that 15 acres, and they want to go borrow money to build a home on there. And there's going to be a title research on it, like an abstract, an opinion of an abstract, and the bank's going to say, oh, wait a minute, there's a utility easement there on your land. And you go, oh no, that's way over on the west side of that quarter section. That isn't what the paper says. The paper says it's the quarter section. Be aware of that, because that's where it could hinder future development on the land. Now, the landowner may need to locate the easement utility at his or her expense for any future surface development. And that may be if you want to clear up that easement, and you may want to get it to a strip easement. That's going to cost some time and money, and the utility company may or may not agree to that. And at future safety concerns, I don't live out in the country, and so safety concerns where you might think you know where the utility is located, but it's within the whole quarter section. Of course, we have the North Dakota 1 call that you're required to call, but it could cause some safety concerns. You really don't know unless you were the landowner at the time the utility was put in and you watched them put it in. Other than that, a new owner would go, well, yeah, there's a power line out there someplace, but I don't know where it's at. So that there are safety concerns, and I don't have very many examples, but you folks may have many more than me. Next one, please. A properly defined easement is locatable. The easement is locatable on the land and does not encumber large areas unnecessary. The easement does not create issues with title. And title would be that a blanket easement encumbers the whole quarter section, and I gave you an illustration of that. The landowner does not need to locate the easement at his or her expense for future surface development. The easement is retraceable by a North Dakota land surveyor. And again, we'll show you an illustration of one that is not retraceable. And importantly, the utility in the easement does not create future safety concerns. There's always items that you have to think of when you're signing an easement. Would you go next one? Okay, here's an example of a strip easement, and I'll just run through a few items that NDSPLS would ask you to look for on a survey drawing. Now, some people may call them exhibits, whatever they call them, but there should be a few items that are on that drawing more than just a graphics like a picture. You know, a plat is one thing, it has dimensions. A map is different. A map is like a state highway map. It doesn't tell you how many miles are between cities and that. It's drawn to a scale. You have approximation, but it doesn't give you the detailed information. And here's a few things that we look at. We look at a vicinity map. We got a heading, a north arrow, a graphic scale, the scale of what it's drawn to, a legend, a few notes on it, the survey company, a surveyor certificate with the easement description, and the surveyor's seal and signature. These are items that you should maybe look for on what some people call an exhibit. We call them, when there's dimensions, there's a plat, and we have an enlargement of this. Can you go to your next one, please? In this particular case, it is a 40-acre aliquot part where this easement is located. But the easement, in the description, in the heading, and we'll see it, it starts out like, in this case, it is a 33-foot wide permanent easement. Right there, right in the heading of your description, it tells you that it limits, it's a strip easement, how wide. In this case here, and this is an actual easement on state land, this northeast and northwest on this particular township section. There was, I don't know what rural water system it was, but it was an actual easement. And so we had the section line. Here's the section corner, the north quarter corner. So there was a half mile there, the 2632. And right in here is the 16th corner of a 1316. Okay. The right-of-way for the highway or roadway was 75 feet. Now here's a point that I want you to look at. When you look at these, do a little math on them, because I never made this up. This was just drawn, taken from an actual easement. And it looks all good, but there's a question here, and I'm going to point it out to you. Okay, there's 33 feet wide here, and if we go to the description, it's 16.5 on each side. Okay? Now, here's 100 feet down from the section line on the quarter line. So if you take 100 and minus 16.5 and then minus your 75 feet, right in here, there's a strip of 8.5 feet wide. It's not in the road easement. It's not in this utility easement. It's not covered, as far as I know. Just like this part of the aliquot part is not covered, that strip is not covered. In surveying, we call that a spite strip. There's some reason, maybe the telephone company has a telephone line in there, that maybe there's overlapping easements. So I'm cautioning you, when you look at these things, see if they're really what you want. You know, I look at what I'd call the boilerplate in an easement, and that's the grantee puts down 6, 8, 10 items that they want included in this easement. And you and landowners have to understand really what those 8 or 10 bullets mean. Because when you sign it, you're granting them what they requested there. And if you don't understand it, you may be giving them something that you really thought you weren't giving them. So and that part, you have to know what they mean, and generally, now I don't know how many people do it, but of course a utility company usually has a legal department that they prepare their documents, and they're representing the utility company. So they want everything possible for their client. And if you give them the farm, they'll take it. On the other hand, you want to restrict them to only what they need. They don't need the farm if they only need a 50-foot strip. So if you hire an attorney to help you out, all parties need to understand what these requests mean and what actually will happen. And you know, usually you only learn from your mistakes. Next slide, please. Oh, there's the direction and length, like that's called a bearing, and the distance that's on the state land. Next one. Of course, we have it tied to the public land survey system. There's the section corner, the quarter corner, and of course this is a 16th corner on the section line, which that is the boundary of this 40 aliquot part. And so we do have the ties, and it shows the width of the easement here.
And it's retraceable?
Nope. The center described, or the described center line of the easement is one location. But with this width, of total width of 33 feet, they can meander back and forth in there within that 33 feet, absolutely. But it's better to have, in my mind, it's better to have a meander back and forth in a 33-foot strip than have a meander back and forth across the quarter section. Yeah. And again, I worked for industry, so we as industry wanted things too, so we had to deal with landowners. I dealt on both sides of this subject. They claimed they were taking so many acres, and that's maybe the acres that they had, but they went every place.
They went all over it, angled through, yeah.
Oh yeah, and again, the Land Surveying Society, NDSPLS, is not against development. Keep that in mind. A lot of surveyors earn money off oil development, off rural water, off electric or communications, earn a living off that. But as our mission statement was, we want to be fair and practical to everybody. And if this was a perfect world, and we didn't have disputes, we wouldn't need land surveyors to set boundary lines. We certainly wouldn't. Next one, please. Okay, this you cannot see too well because of its size. Now, I don't know if it's necessary, Ed. I don't see where you have a little bar to enlarge this. But, and you maybe can't read it off your screen. Okay, hold it there. Remember what I said? If it's a strip easement, it's in the heading of the description. If you don't see that, that's another red flag. Be careful what you're signing. Can you go on, Ed, please? Commencing at? Yeah. Okay. Now, when you see a description written like this, it wasn't written from some land agent. It wasn't written from some attorney. It was developed by a surveyor. Attorneys and land agents may be aware of the term bearing and distance, but they are not schooled in making these particular trig functions close and work properly. So you get a good idea how your description was developed. That particular easement there, Greg just showed that to me right before we walked in. And it goes back and it describes a number of parcels of land as recorded to these people. So they encumbered every tract of land that's listed in there for this easement. And it's more than one section of land. I have seen some wind tower plats, surveyed plats, signed, sealed by North Dakota surveyors, over by Valley City. Is that called like the Bald Hill or something wind farm? It's between Tower City and Valley City, up in there on the north side of the interstate. And there was descriptions written for their ingress egress easements, and that was also that strip, and they were strips for laying their electrical cable. Now I can't remember what was designated for the actual site of the tower, if it was a blocked out 300 by 300 square, I can't answer that. It was a number of years ago when I saw it. But they were not blanket easements for that wind farm. Each tower in each section of land, and they surveyed all sections of land that they were putting their utilities on, and they broke them down. They did the legal subdivision of a section of land into the quarters and then into the sixteenths for the different landowners, and it was all surveyed. Now I can't go into any more detail than that because I just don't know. It was a number of years ago. Next one. Oh, we did go over the legal description, the signature, and the seal. Now we know where the utility is located in the northeast quarter of Section 10. Remember when I went back and we looked at that description in Burke County? Well, to me, I still don't know. But here's some undisturbed vegetation, and this is the strip they took for that particular pipeline, but their easement was the entire quarter section. I have seen a court case where they didn't describe a strip, but it ended up, the court said, the utility company, even though it was a blanket easement, only acquired a strip. Now, how that took place, I don't know. But yes, Ed.
I'm just going to mention that when you're talking about that, some easement documents, when you first read them, appear to be a blanket easement, but if you read through the whole paragraph, sometimes it will say that it's the northeast quarter, but then there will be verbiage in there stating that it is to be confined to whatever they need it for construction. So sometimes that verbiage is in the easement language that, under the legal description it says the northeast quarter, but further down in the document it'll say the easement is to be defined to the area of construction. That doesn't happen on all of them, but it is. I've seen that on some. So.
And the area of construction means anywhere within that quarter section. And then they have the right to go, and if something looks like it's a little tough sledding, they'll go where it's easier, and then when it's all said and done, they may have a strip, but you don't know where that strip's going to lie before you sign that easement. Okay, our North Dakota State Department of Trust Lands, they require, following the approval of a route, so you have to tell them that where you want to go across their land. But they want a acceptable centerline survey. They want a survey plat drawn to scale, accurate, showing the center line of the easement across state land, including entrance and exit points, direction or angles, and distances from quarter or section corners and points of intersection of quarter lines, preferred scale, and this is their requirements. Right here at this website, that's where this came from. And this is what the state trust lands, that's what they want to see, and they won't give an easement unless you meet their requirements. A written narrative of the centerline description, including distances between PIs or point or intersection, meaning where the utility, the strip easement changes direction. PI, point of intersection. Points of entrance and exit intersecting with quarter lines, ties to the section corners and or quarter corners. And that example that we looked at back a few slides, and we can go back to it if you'd like to see it again, that showed all those ties, like the 100 feet, the bearings, the distances. Yeah, right here. See, the points where it, I'll say here, enters the land, and the point here where it exits the land. This is a straight line easement. There were no PIs or, jogs in the strip easement. But if there are, the State Land Department, they want to see that. Okay, can we move?
Go back to that.
Recorded.
Well,
Surveyed plan.
it's not cheap.
Yeah.
The point.
That's one reason why they probably don't do it. Expenses.
Yeah, but it's not as expensive as putting in a pipeline.
No,
You know,
it never is.
I have tried to work out percentages of the cost of a survey compared to the cost of the improvement. And I can say that certainly it's under 10% of the improvement, and it's down to 7, or maybe Ed has some different,
I would say it's in that ballpark.
but it's, yeah.
It's just another way that they can cut their expenses.
Absolutely. When Greg had mentioned that we went over to the Capitol building, that had to be 2 years ago, when the commissioners from the State Water Commission were there, and a lot of legislators, and it was the thrust of the meeting was easements, strip easements, blanket easements, and a number of people stood up and said, well, if we would go to a strip easement, that just increases the cost of the project. And there was even a couple state legislators that stood up and said that. Well, we can't afford to put in strip easements. The question is, then how come you can afford to do it when you cross state-owned land, but you can't afford to do it for Mr. Joe Blow that lives next door to it? There wasn't a good answer to it, There's just not.
And litigation is not cheap either.
No. Survey is cheap compared to any lawsuit. And their geographic or geologic features, there's examples here, creeks, draws, escarpments, trees. They kind of want to know that, but I don't know for what reason. I just don't know why the State Land Department asked for that.
Just another point of reference maybe on the map.
Yeah.
That might be.
Point of reference, and also because I do some work across state lands with pipelines, they want to know certain areas maybe require boring rather than open trench. They want to see those areas.
Okay. Or to bore underneath a drainage creek or something instead of cutting.
Or wiping out a bunch of trees,
Yeah, okay.
because trees are so plentiful there in North Dakota.
Well, yeah. Next slide, please. This is a checklist, and we're really not going to go over it. But the federal government, when a utility company wants to cross federal land, the federal government has this particular checklist, and they require mapping. And there's all kinds of requirements. Pretty much, if you had this in your hand and it was readable, the right-of-way length, the acreage, the I can't even see it, centerline description, bearings, azimuth. Azimuth is another method of describing a direction. Roads, I don't know, but they have the whole checklist. Similar to the state of North Dakota Trust Land Department has. So now we have two examples, federal agency, a federal-owned land and state-owned land that require mapping. And they all want a strip. They don't want blanket easements. Next. What do we have here? Okay, North Dakota private landowners, requirements for easements. As far as I know, there are none. Maybe you folks know that there's requirements for easements. There's currently no requirements for utility easements on North Dakota private land. Some landowner groups, such as yours, may provide information, organizational, and support efforts. That's what I guess we're doing right here today, trying to get our minds wrapped around what takes place, especially on your own property. One of the issues is going to your recorder's office, someone going to the recorder's office, and a 6-page or 7-page document such as this one, and want it recorded, and they count the pages and they go, okay, that is $70. That's the end of the story, and that'll get put in the record. But you know what? Nothing will get done because it's hid. Who are the people that know it? The person that brought it in for recording, and maybe, just maybe, the recorder. The recorder looked at $70. Not on what they were recording. They looked at $70. And if it sits there, that'll just sit there and simmer forever and ever unless someone finds it, discovers it, and takes action against the recorder's office.
According to this, they're not performing their duties according required by state statutes.
I agree with you, but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough nut to crack. Now here, generally, North Dakota landowner is on his or her own to work with the utility company and or their land agent, and that is really the way it sets. It's tough, and if you don't know what the definitions mean and you don't understand what's in that document, wow, don't sign it. I had an investment. I went to a presentation one time on investments and different annuities and things like this, and the guy, he would sell them. Now, he said one thing to everybody in the audience: if you don't fully understand it, don't buy it. Don't buy it. And he sold them. And I thought that was a pretty good piece of information to go by. Okay, the average North Dakota landowner is not aware of potential title, survey, and location issues by signing improperly described easements. And again, one easement that should throw up a red flag is in their heading when they start with Township Range, Principal Meridian, section, and then Northeast Quarter. Land people do that. The only reason I think of it is they keep their electronic filing system sorted by township range. That's what they do. And so they work it backwards from what a surveyor would. Next one, Ed. This is the recommendations from the Surveying Society. Amongst ourselves, we want to develop standards for utility easements in this state. And we right now think that our state trust lands has a pretty good criteria for the document. We really think that that document should be adopted by all And certainly it's maybe a living document and could be refined in the future, but today I think it's very sufficient. Develop a utility easement checklist for professional land surveyors in this state. And we do have the checklist, and we have a real thick manual of practice. I don't know how many pages it is.
27 pages.
127 pages, and we have the checklist in there. And a lot, like I say, that you saw the federal government one, and that was a checklist. And we pretty much follow that.
You can read ours in the manual.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Require all utility companies placing easements on private lands to use the same requirements of the North Dakota State Department of Trust Lands. That's what we're promoting. So this is in our manual, and you can see that there's all kinds of requirements. And if it's on, when you go through the survey plat, and it's on there, you check it off. So if it's not, when you go through and you read one of these items and it's not on your plat, well, don't check it off. Go back and get it put on the plat so everything is complete. This is just an aid for surveyors to help them not overlook some item. Next one, please. Oh, the questions. May I ask the utility company to provide a plat, map, survey, or other documents to show the proper location of the easement? Does the utility company have the right to place the utility anywhere or wherever they like within the blanket easement? If you signed a blanket easement? What do I have to do if I already signed a blanket easement? And any questions? Next slide, please. Here we go. We got an answer. Well, my sheet had them all on one. Sorry, Ed. But yes, ask. You should ask before signing the easement. After the easement is signed, you may ask but may not receive the document, plat, map, or survey. Next one. Yes. They may have the right to place the utility where they please within the easement. Oh, that showed up later, within the blanket easement. Next one, please. Okay. You already signed one? You can contact the grantee, most likely the owner of the utility company, the corporation, and ask them to release the original easement and reissue a new easement with the area necessary for their utilities to remain in place. And you'd maybe want to really emphasize that we're not asking you to move it, we're not doing anything. We just want to narrow down the land you encumber, the area of land. Well, just like the example Ed had just mentioned, where he has seen easements where, as you go down, they appear to be a blanket easement in the heading of the description, and then all the boilerplate, and then it comes down to a strip.
That somewhat defines it, even though it's not surveyed, it does define it.
Right.
Yes, but here's an example. That's good, but it's not sufficient, because I'm going to tell you that within that quarter section, there's a strip easement. Where is that strip easement? Does it run through the property of that 15 acres where your son wants to build a house? The finance company, if it's financed, will not loan money on that, because they have no assurance that that is clear and free, that piece of property. That's what encumbers titles. That's what surveyors run into a lot.
Still leaves questions on the title.
Yes. And I know of a case myself where a blanket easement was given in, yes, it was the southeast quarter of a section, and it was a communications cable, like telephone cable. And it was run in there, And people had a good idea where it was, but there could be no development in there. That held up on the opinion of the abstract that there's an easement, a blanket easement in that quarter section, and we don't know where it is. That was the attorney that examined the abstract came out with that opinion. What had to be done, and it worked out very well, but the landowner had to pay for it. The utility company came and they flagged it. The developer had to get it surveyed, had to have the surveyor write the strip easement, make the map, the document. The utility company, they gladly signed it. They didn't have to do anything but locate it. And they maybe would have had to do that, you know, all you have to do is call and say, hey, I'm going to dig a hole over here in this quarter section, would you mark your utility? So, next one please. Well, that's the end of this slide presentation, and if people look at the slide presentation, it's, like I said, it's a mixture. A self-learning tool, but maybe not enough to learn everything. But for a presentation, there's more than we needed for bullet points on a presentation.
Has your organization drafted any legislation yet to propose, or?
To propose that everybody in the state use?
Yeah.
No, and the big reason why not is because those lawmakers down there are going to say, your fence building and you're funneling all this work right over to your coffers. You're doing it to make money, not to protect the public. This society or surveyors they wouldn't stand a chance putting a piece of, maybe wouldn't even get a legislator to sponsor it. But now you folks maybe could as landowners, but not surveyors are selling the survey service.
But it brings a lot of
on trespass of surveyors. One thing that I believe would help a lot with the permission is that surveyors in North Dakota don't have the right of entry. And what that details is that, or includes, is if you own a part of a section of land, let's say a quarter, and your neighbor owns a quarter, and your neighbor would hire a surveyor to do that quarter section. To break that down and get him the quarter line so the center of section is set, that whole perimeter of that section needs to be surveyed. Without that, it doesn't get completed. So the surveyor may have to go on a number of landowners' lands to complete that survey just to do that quarter section. Surveyors in North Dakota don't have the right of entry, and let's say that there's just one landowner that wouldn't allow access. That stops that completed survey. That fella can't get his survey completed. Now, if there was a right of entry, meaning, and in that particular statute, it was written in there that the landowner and the tenant need to be informed. Now,
And that should be on your checklist.
Yeah.
well, for permission, yeah.
Yes.
Before you do the plating, yeah. That checklist was for plating,
Oh, okay.
the documents and plating, but, and I'm not saying it's right, but when you go down a section line, that's open to public travel. And so that surveyor could travel all the way around that section And if it's still prairie trail or whatever, and it's the congressional 33-foot easement, 33 on each side of the section line, that 33 feet is still fee owner. The owner of that quarter section owns that right away. Just because there's an easement on it for travel, they still pay taxes on it. They own it. Now, it's open to the public for travel, but there are times when surveyors are going down the section line and they're stopping. Well, I got to go down that section corner down here a half mile. You're not going across here because that's my land. That's a true statement. That's that owner's land. But the owner says, no, I don't care if there's easement for travel. You're not going down there. I own it. So there's an issue there that not everything's sweet. Surveyors would like a right of entry, which if there was a right of entry, I feel very confident that the permission of the area people where the survey is done would be notified.
Notification opens up a lot of doors.
Yep.
I really don't mind that you're gonna do this, but I need to know because there's so much other garbage going on out there. I need to know who's on my property at a particular time. It's simple, a phone call.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a cell phone.
And
And you can get my cell phone number. It's easy.
And at the same time, you may be getting a benefit from the survey from your neighbor. He's actually gonna end up establishing your property boundaries also. So, which you may not have to pay for. The other thing it does is cut the overall cost of the survey down. If I know I don't have to go out and eat pie and drink coffee on the farmstead table, which I like to do, but
My wife makes
the
good
meter is
pie.
running, you know, we're
Yeah.
sitting there talking. And so if we can do a lot of that by phone or by law and notification, that's the big thing.
Yep.
And here's another thing that a competent surveyor, we have a rigid code of ethics. And you may not have noticed that with some of the surveyors we've had here in the past. But if we have a violation or a complaint against a licensed land surveyor, you lose your license. You lose your license. We have to go through a board of review. You get put on the hot seat.
Well, the license plates on the pickups were from Idaho.
Mm.
Yeah, well, that's understood.
So.
And we know of that, but, the 150 that are living in this state
Yeah.
they're born and raised on farms, most of them, just like you and I. And, they have the same interests in mind that you do. We get madder than hell at some of these out-of-staters that come in here, but
Oh,
there's nothing we can do about it. They have a license to practice. But we can bring them into the table. If the board calls me to go out and investigate them, we can bring them into the table and go through that process if that's what they want. But they got deep pockets. They fly Lear jets in here with 3 attorneys to attend a board meeting. That's the kind of stuff you're up against.
When you asked about the cost of surveys and that, I was involved with a survey this summer, and it was over near McCluskey, North Dakota, and there was 2 sections of land we were going to survey. So the individual that hired us owned the land but didn't live there. And that individual wanted an estimated cost. And I looked at it and I said, I think it's $12,000. And, well, I want it done. Go ahead. Now, you remember that if things aren't as sweet as that they look right now, it's going to be more money. The meter's going to run. To survey and complete this division of property within those 2 sections of land, we had to survey 22 sections of land. 22 sections to actually break down the property between 2 owners in 2 sections of land. $25,000. So now, I mean, things aren't cheap. Your combine's not cheap either.
Did you find very many of the original survey stones anywhere?
Yes, I do. and I have a philosophy. If I can't find them, no one else is going to find them. So that means I dig hard. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of calculations, and all that takes time. But that is the only way to assure that your survey is right. Is if you're able.
Those stones have been buried, haven't they, in the roads?
They have.
But there's pins put in there?
Well, yes. You know, if a surveyor really wants to dig for them in a road, the counties will allow that. But can you imagine the meter bill? Because now you have another person and you're trucking around a backhoe and you're making the disturbance in the county road. Let's say it's a gravel road. You wouldn't do it in asphalt road. That would be cost prohibitive. And you know, if there's a bump there, you got to come back and repair that bump and do all that other work in there. So a lot of, let's say, well-established county roads, no, you really, if there isn't an iron pin there, you don't go ahead and dig up that intersection. Of course, when I worked for the coal mining company, I dug up every intersection, every quarter corner. Where I worked, there was potholes in the county roads every half mile, but we had to pay for it too. But there was a big liability there, because if we were wrong in any way, there were some deep pockets that someone could come after. So the responsibility was a much different.
Our area, there's only one original stone I know of.
Heavenly Days, no. Good thing you bring that up.
Because I know when I crossed the international border, that's not the 49.
But I don't know, how many of you folks have a GPS unit?
Tractors.
Yeah, you got them right in that telephone laying there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry, you go out and you look for, you put in a coordinate location, wherever you get it from. You put it in your phone or your GPS unit. You go out there today, it'll maybe show you. Right here it is, here's the line. You go out there tomorrow, and it could be 35 feet over there. So that's not the tool to use. And surveyors, when they go out and they use their GPS equipment, it's not like a handheld $60 one that you use for hiking trails or something like that. What's the latest cost on a receiver?
Survey grade receiver, probably about $40,000 or $50,000.
Yeah. And usually there's two of them on the job.
But you can't use those for the location then, if it's RT corrected then?
Yeah, if it's RTK corrected, you
Oh.
can't use it if you have a good coordinate.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to have a known spot.
A good coordinate to go look. What it does is it gives you a search area.
Yeah.
We can go out from the township line 3 townships away and come in, and within 30 feet, that corner should be here. Gives us a place to start.
I know, like usually crossing the border, the 49th isn't where it shows on the GPS where it is. It's close, but it's not exact.
I've had farmers and combines tell me they can show me where their property line is.
Yeah.
They're good for resource, nice straight lines on the field, that sort of thing. No complaints with that, but you ain't gonna, if you can smell the bacon, you'll find the camp, basically is what a combine does.
Yeah.
What's your
Yeah.
position on, you have an established road 20, 30 years, and the mark is from the center line of the road, but the pin is actually off 15 feet, say, from the center of the road. Now, I'm told that you have to use the center of the road because that's the established road.
Wow. There's no easy answer to that question. Because in one of my projects, like 8 years ago or so, there were similar deal. Here was established roads, and there was a monument that was set, recorded. Surveyors have to record their monuments by law, and it was at the shoulder of the road at the intersection. And I looked around and I said, that doesn't make sense to me. So then I looked at I got to research how that monument was determined to be set in that location. And that monument was set by what's called proportionate measurement. And proportionate measurement is a method, acceptable method of setting monuments. But it is the last resort. If you had roads that were acceptable by the local landowners, that this road is on the section line, and the section line should be pretty much centered on this road. Oh, it'd be tough for a competent surveyor and an energetic surveyor to set one by proportionate method. Now, proportionate method, I'll just say it this way. A lazy surveyor could have set that by proportionate. Well, sometimes those can be ripened into what would be a property line agreement. But if the people that own the land at that time didn't complete the paperwork, the document papers, and sign it and get it recorded, that's not the property line. And if you want to call it the property line, you're going to have to sue for it. You're going to have to sue for adverse possession or acquiescence to that line. Now, you could talk to your attorney about that. There are very few adverse possession or acquiescence cases that the claimer is the victory. Very few in North Dakota. In fact, this one project 8 years ago, I ran into a number of pieces of land, number of sections, and things didn't make sense from my survey and lines of occupation. And one landowner out there, I got visiting with him, and he said, well, now remember the way the creek and the drainage is coming off the hill in there? My father and the neighbor, it was tough for them to farm, so one of them said, how about if I farm your land up to the creek and we put the fence there, so I'm getting about 5 acres of your land, and then we'll move this fence over to give you 5 acres of my land so we both get the same acreage. That's what they were doing, but the problem is you can't change the section line, you can't change the quarter line, you can't change the 16th lines. You have a different property line in there. And if your deed says the northeast quarter, one boundary is the quarter line, and that's your boundary, that's your deed. Now, if you want different land, that's a law case. That's not me to tell you what to do. And I was dealing with royalties, subsurface royalties. And that royalty was like the northeast quarter. I don't care what your surface boundaries are. I'm looking at this coal underneath the ground on this quarter section. I need to know where that coal is located. I can't remember the term. Exclusive? If the first utility company has an exclusive easement, there's a term for it.
Right.
Yeah. So if they have the exclusive easement, the other utility not only has to get an easement from the surface or fee owner, they have to get an easement from the owner of the exclusive easement also. And here's an example. Now, here's a situation that I have run across, and this may have different legal opinions on it, but this is my practice of surveying has developed this. Let's say that you own a section of land and the county wants to build a road on the section line, and there's the 33 feet, but they want 75-foot right-of-way on each side. I don't care what they call it, all they acquire is an easement. They don't have fee ownership of that from their right-of-way boundary to the section line. That 75 feet is not owned by the county. The landowner still owns it. They may take it off your tax roll. The county may take it off your tax roll, that acreage. Now, If a utility company wants to come in there and put a utility line down in that right-of-way, in my experience, the utility company will go to the landowner, because they're still the fee owner, and get an easement from them, but they have to go to the county because they have some rights of an easement in there and get permission, or maybe it's called like a secondary easement, I don't know the term. But then there's two documents. They can't go just to the county and say, hey, can we put overhead electric line down here on the edge of your right-of-way, inside the right-of-way, and the county goes, oh yeah, that's not going to bother us. They don't have a legal right to say that. But you check that out with your attorney once, but that's what I have found.
The problem.
Well, that isn't.
You got to pay for that 25 feet.
That isn't that law. That law is that a utility company in a county road needs to place their utility 75 feet or more beyond the center line of the right-of-way. Okay? That's where the law says the utility company has to place it, just because of the reason the road may be improved. That didn't give anybody any land.
No, it didn't.
But now
the
if...
problem is if the 25-foot rule, I'll call it.
Only if that utility was constructed prior to the implementation of that law.
Right.
Okay, now, if a person, if the county has a 33-foot county road right away,
50
the
foot.
no,
Township 33 feet, county's 50 feet.
okay, I'm talking an unimproved congressional section line right away. And the utility company says, well, I just want to put it along the fence here at 33 feet. They can get an easement from the landowner to do that. But they're also holding themselves out, because if the county says, we're going to improve this road, now for the utility company has to move it at their expense.
That's right.
Unless it was constructed prior to that law that was implemented. Now, the other part of that is that the utility company can go to the county commissioners and get a waiver on that requirement of that 75 feet.
Yeah.
Now, a county board may or may not do that, because if they give it and then they decide to improve that road, now the county has to pay for moving the utility, not the utility
That's
company.
right. But good luck on that one.
Chances are that you're not going to get the county to waive that requirement.
But
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Well, the other thing is, I have problems with that, because it doesn't matter if the county has 33 feet, 50 feet, or 75 feet. What they hold is an easement.
That's right.
Is only an easement. I don't care if they call it a warranty deed. For road purposes, there's case law all the time. It's an easement. Well, they...
And I'm just saying.
And when they acquire that extra 25 feet, they're acquiring an easement, but they have to give compensation for it.
And that's where there was no compensation.
But this deal with, if you want to do some improvement on your land, and the standard is in the county, and I don't care what county it is, but it's not in Mercer County where I live. The standard is new roads, we want 75 feet, and we will pay you for that land, okay? Easement, whatever. But to say, we will not give you zoning approval, we will not record the survey unless you gift us that extra strip.
That's what Ward County's doing.
I think you're holding the public hostage, and I think that's not right.
Feels like extortion.
Yeah. You're up, so we run out of time.
No, you're great. We could
Thank
go on
you.
all day. I wanted to thank you for coming.